Today is February 23rd, 2026, and I'm William Michael. I'm the founder and headmaster of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. The Classical Liberal Arts Academy is an accredited online study program that works to make real classical Catholic education available to families, to students of all ages around the world. I'd like to take some time today to talk about a plan for homeschooling that I would recommend for homeschooling parents who have no idea what they're doing. When I say homeschooling parents who have no idea what they're doing, I'm not being negative or critical. I'm being honest. I'm talking to Christian parents who desire to give their children a Christian education, who are concerned about the quality of modern schools, who love their children very much, who fear God and desire to honor Him as parents. But when it comes to education, when it comes to homeschooling, when it comes to college and career preparation, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how these things work. They don't know how to prepare their children for the future. They may not know how homeschooling works and so on, but they have good intentions and they want to do the best that they can. Obviously, highly educated parents who work professionally in education, who have an abundance of resources that allow them to obtain products and expert help from others, they're not going to need a whole lot of advice as they go along. But many families today, many parents are in a position where they're struggling. They're struggling financially. They've got a mom at home with the kids in her childbearing years. They may have multiple children already. They're young as parents. Dad is trying to work and provide for the family. And that lifestyle is very challenging. There's a reason why so many people avoid it. My wife and I, when we were young, in our 20s, we were struggling financially, just as is natural, not that there was any problem. But it takes years to get on your feet professionally, to establish a stable financial home economy. And while we go through those lean years, while we go through those difficult years, we're young, we don't know what to do, we often don't have a lot of support. Those are also the childbearing years. And homeschooling needs to take place during those lean years. So to have a realistic plan that gives parents a clear sense of what needs to be done, to take all pressure off, to drive away all unrealistic, silly expectations and focus on what are the actual duties of Christian parents and what is a no-fail plan for homeschooling, I believe is very helpful for most homeschooling families. The danger that I would warn of is that in modern circles, there is a problem that's known as Christian arrogance. It's where people become Christians and they think that because they're Christians, they know how to do everything, that everything that they do is good, that their opinions are all brilliant. And they look at experienced people and scoff at them as if, that may be true for you, but that's not true for me because, everything I do is going to be successful. And I'd like to warn you against that. I'd like to warn you that the work of homeschooling is very difficult. Think about the time commitment. It's every day, all day for 18 years, and that's just for one child. So if you have 4, 5, 6 children, I've got 10 children. That time and energy, the financial resources and challenges, it's all multiplied. And if you don't have a realistic plan, if you go into it arrogantly, talking all kinds of nonsense about how you're going to raise the most educated children who have ever lived. You're going to raise a bunch of saints, even though there's nothing in history that suggests that those claims are likely to be fulfilled. You're probably going to fail. But if you have an honest plan, and if you enter into homeschooling with humility and with a practical prudence to understand what needs to be done and how it can be done, and if you have realistic, attainable, measurable goals for homeschooling, you can enjoy great success. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. I'm going to be very practical, very simple, and I believe that this will be very helpful for honest homeschooling parents. The first problem that homeschooling parents usually want to address is just the cultural problem of modern schools. We believe as Christian parents that children, like young plants, need to be raised in an ideal environment. That's why we build nurseries and greenhouses for farms and gardens. We don't put seed in the ground outside and hope for the best. If we know that the elements and we know that there are insects and weeds that are going to harm a young plant, we don't just stick seed in the ground and hope for the best. We actually create an artificial environment that's carefully controlled because we know that these young plants can't resist all of the challenges, all of the threats that they face. So we create a nursery and we shelter young plants so that they have a chance to set their roots, sprout, put out their first leaves and begin to grow and gain strength. And even when we raise them in the nursery, we only introduce them to the elements little by little. It's called hardening the plants. We start by moving seed trays and things out into the direct sunlight, out into the wind, and we continue to control their environment until they're well established and strong, and we trust that they can resist those challenges. The same is true for children. We don't raise children by just tossing them into the world and hoping for the best. We love our children. There's nothing we value more than our children, and we want them not to survive, but to thrive. We want them to be strong and healthy and happy. We want everything to go well for them. And to do that, dropping them off at a local public school or even a local private school, that's not a realistic way to raise a good child. And we know that. The schools are not good. The schools scoff at traditional values. They don't take responsibility for the success of every child. And whenever there are failures, the school just blames the parents or blames the children, or they just label the children or sort them into groups and levels. There's no responsibility for the success of the children, and that's one of the fundamental flaws of the modern school system. And we know that. We don't want our children just lumped in with a bunch of kids who happen to be their age and then just be sorted and labeled and graded by the school staff. We want our individual children, we want them to be taught and helped and supported. And modern schools are really not interested in doing that. They're not capable of doing that. And so, in the old days, wealthy families would hire private tutors who would work with those children all day long. If you go back to classical culture, they had a servant called a pedagogue who literally accompanied a child all day long through all of his studies, all of his activities, to make sure he was learning, he was following instructions, he was safe, he was behaving well, and so on. That was a luxury. That was for wealthy people. The common people had no such benefits. They often had no education. So this idea that just because we're Christians, we're going to raise children with all of the benefits that ancient wealthy children had who were led around by servants and served by private tutors, it's just not realistic. And we've got to respect the reality that those services are effective and necessary. And if we don't have the means, don't have the opportunity to provide those services, there are going to be negative consequences. So when we think about modern schools, we have to be realistic and say, look, the school is a good option. It's better than nothing. And if we want something better, we're going to have to take matters into our own hands as parents. And thankfully, with all of the technology and resources we have available today, we can do things that parents in past generations had no chance to possibly do, couldn't even comprehend doing at home. So we've got to learn to be prudent about this, to understand what needs to be done, what the priorities are, what our actual possibilities are, and then we've got to have a realistic, actionable, measurable plan to get that work done. So the first concern we have as homeschool parents is usually to put our children in an environment where they're going to be cared for individually and helped to thrive individually. And that's not modern school. So that's the first concern. Secondly, we're concerned about the actual instruction and content of our children's education. We don't want our children to receive the secular, democratic, American education that's provided in public schools. They're Christian children. They need to receive a Christian education. As Christians, there's a lot to learn. They need to learn sacred scripture. They need to be initiated into the life of the church. They need to be catechized. They need to be taught to behave well. They need to be disciplined. They need to have a Christian life modeled for them. They need to learn how to forgive others. They need to learn how to bear wrongs patiently. They need to learn how to subordinate inferior desires, like lusts and gluttony, to higher desires, like the virtues. These things are not going to be done at a modern school. And it doesn't even matter if it's a public school. Most of these things are not going to be done at a private school or a Christian school either. So if we're concerned about the content of our children's education, there's not going to be a place where we can just send them and write a tuition check. So again, if we have desires to give our children a better education in terms of content, we're going to have to take matters into our own hands and find a way to do that. Thirdly, as parents, we're not even concerned entirely with our children. We're concerned with our own responsibility as parents. We're concerned with doing God's will for our own sake. And so we're looking at the challenge of education and raising a family and providing for children and being good stewards of all of the resources, which include time and energy, not just money. Being good students of all these resources to give the children an upbringing that is worthy of the Lord, that actually allows us to fulfill our duties as parents for our own sake. So that's a third challenge. So when you put all these things together, homeschooling in the 21st century often becomes a necessary reality. And I would argue that for most homeschooling families, those are the things that are driving them to homeschool. There are very few homeschool families that say, our desire to homeschool is to provide our children with an elite education, better than anything that can be found anywhere, and our homeschool is going to target the most selective, the most prestigious universities in the world. That's usually not the goal of homeschooling. We're usually concerned with salvation, with obedience, with being faithful, with keeping our children safe. We hear all the terrible stories about schools and teachers preying on children sexually, grooming them and abusing them, pumping all kinds of immoral ideologies into their heads as kids and so on. We don't want any of that near our children. That's usually what drives us to consider homeschooling, and that's necessary because the situation is bad in modern society. So having said all of that, we're concerned about the spiritual formation of our children. We're concerned about their health and safety. We're concerned about their happiness. We're concerned about our own duties as parents. And those are the things that we need to be able to focus on as parents. We need to be able to focus on those primary goals, primary motives for homeschooling, because they can easily be abandoned, and they often are abandoned once families get into homeschooling who really don't know what they're doing, because desires and expectations can just be out of control and crazy. There's an endless supply of homeschooling products and all kinds of gimmicks and nonsense that you're going to be flooded with as a parent. And it's just very easy to lose sight of the original intention in homeschooling. We've got to have a realistic plan, and we've got to always keep the main thing, or we'll get into all kinds of trouble. So I think we need to start by talking about the end result and then reverse engineer this whole homeschooling process. And let me just explain how simple a realistic set of expectations may be to implement in a homeschool. Here's the goal for homeschooling. This is what I would like to present to you, and I'm speaking practically as an educator. In homeschooling your children, you should have one goal. Very, very simple. One goal. That goal should be this: to put your children at age 18 in a position where they have all options open to them and they've got great opportunities for success in adult life. That should be the goal. To put your children in a position at age 18 where all options, vocationally, occupationally, are open to them. That's the goal. You don't want to get into this nonsense of saying, I want my son to be a priest, because that's not for you to choose. Or to say, I want my child to be an engineer, or to be a mathematician, or to do this, or to be a carpenter, or to do what I do. None of that is your right as a parent to determine. One of the most important things to learn as a Catholic parent is that your children have the right to choose their own adult life for themselves. They get to choose whether they want to be married or not be married. They get to choose what sort of occupation they're going to pursue, what kind of life they're going to pursue. That is your children's business, and they need to be given the freedom to make those decisions when they become adults. You don't have a right as a parent to put your child on a path that you choose, as if those children are your own possessions or your own servants, and so on. Your children are born with the freedom to make their own adult choices, and those choices are none of your business. And so if you're going to raise your children charitably and respectfully and within God's will, you want to give them everything that they need to be in a position as young adults where they can make choices based on what they want to do, based on what their talents and interests lead them to want to do, based on what the circumstances of their lives in their generation require them to do. You want to put them in a position where all options are open so that they can be free to make choices that are best for them in their adult life. Is that not the most charitable thing that parents can do? To put their children in a position where all options are open to them as they enter young adulthood. It certainly is. And that should be our goal. So again, the goal in our homeschooling, in our parenting, is to put our children in a position at age 18 where all options are open to them and they can make choices based on their own interests and abilities and desires, and actually have the opportunity to do things that they desire to do. That's the goal. That's unselfish, charitable, generous parenting. And it's also parenting according to God's will, not seeing our children as some means for us to gain from or to live through, which is selfish parenting. So that's the goal in parenting. And now we've got to consider, what are those options that we want to think about? What are these options that we want our children to have open to them when they enter adulthood? First of all, we want our children to have religious vocations open to them when they become adults. We want our children, if they're inspired by God to desire to enter into a religious vocation, to be a priest or a monk or a nun, a brother or a sister, we want them to have that option open to them. We're not going to set them on a path where it's become a priest or bust, which many homeschool parents do, and it doesn't work. But we want our children to have the option to choose religious life when they reach young adulthood. So that's one thing to consider, right? When my son or daughter is 18 years old and they become legally independent and are free to make decisions for their adult life, will I have made religious vocations an option available to them? That's concern number one. Secondly, we should consider military occupations. In the medieval world, there were three different kinds of lives. There was the life of religion, a life of military service, and a life of peasantry or just manual labor. Not much is different today. It's really the same thing. We've got religious vocations, military occupations, and then there's just sort of civilian work as the third category. We would like for our children to have the option of military careers, which are very diverse. Military careers don't mean being handed a machine gun and dropped off in a battlefield. Military careers include all sorts of occupations, from computing, medical care, all the way to infantry fighting, all kinds of technical engineering, all kinds of careers are included within the modern military. We want those options to be open. There's also different levels of military careers. There's reserves, which is part-time military service. There's active duty, which is full-time. There's ROTC, which is officer training in the university. There's lots of different options that provide for all kinds of different interests, careers, lifestyles, future opportunities, and so on. And it's a big part of modern culture. So keeping the military career option open for our children is important. And then thirdly, civilian careers or secular occupations. We want to put our children in a position where whatever occupation they're interested in, whether it's an academic position, a professional position, a trade, whatever it may be, we would like them to be in a position where they can pursue that successfully. So those are the kinds of things that we need to think about as we're training our children, and our parenting and educating them and training them should all be directed by the Golden Rule, which says that we should do for our children what we would like for our parents to do for us. That's the Golden Rule in parenting, to do for our children what we would like our parents to do for us if we were them. That's the Golden Rule. That's what we need to do. So as we think about these options, we should ask the question, well, okay, so we know the goal. The goal is to put our children into a position at age 18 where all these options are open to them. And let me just pause here for a second. Obviously, by talking about these options, I'm not discounting other options. Like a young girl may say, I don't want any of those things. I would like to get married and be a housewife and mother. I'm not saying anything against that. So when I talk about these options, please don't think that I'm saying, everybody's got to go have a career, everybody's got to get out of the house, everybody's got to go and pursue money and career success. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about keeping doors open, keeping options open so children can choose from all of the options based on their own unique interests as they become adults. That's my point. So now that we have those options in mind, we have to ask ourselves, what do I need to do as a homeschooling parent? What do I need to do in order to put my child in that position? What do I need to do to put my child in that position? And I'm going to say that there are 3 objectives in homeschooling. 3 objectives in homeschooling, and all of these are within the power of parents. 3 objectives in homeschooling, and these are all within the power of the parents. So this is practical and realistic. This is possible. This is measurable. This isn't crazy nonsense talk. 3 objectives. Number 1, raise your child to be confirmed in the Catholic Church. Number 1, raise your child to be confirmed in the Catholic Church. That's number 1. Number 2, raise your child to receive a high school diploma. Raise your child to receive a high school diploma. And number 3, raise your child to be physically healthy as he or she enters young adulthood. Those 3 objectives I would like to present as the objectives that homeschool parents who have no idea what they're doing should direct all of their attention to. All 3 of these things are in your power. Now, when I say physical health, obviously, if a child is born with some physical defect or has some sort of unavoidable physical disease, that's not in our control. But that's normally not the case. I'm talking normal circumstances. I'm talking avoiding problems physically that should be and could be avoided. Putting our children in a position as they enter young adulthood where all options are open to them. Military careers, for example, are going to require a certain level of physical ability, a certain level of physical health. There's a physical obstacle that has to be crossed in order to enter into military careers. The same is true of religious vocations. General health is going to be required for a religious vocation. And then in the civilian, business world, we're going to have to work hard. We're going to have to be able to grind and compete in a competitive, capitalistic marketplace. Our children need to be physically healthy when they reach adulthood. So those 3 objectives: confirmation in the Catholic Church, a high school diploma, and good physical health. Those should be our objectives in homeschooling. If you have no idea what you're doing and you want to put your child in a position at age 18, entering into young adulthood where they have the whole world open to them and they can discern based on their own interests and abilities what vocation they feel God is calling them to or what vocation they would like to pursue, they will have the opportunity to do that because they've been put in a position where all options are open to them. And in modern society, especially if you're in America, this is very easy to do. It's very easy in America to put your children in a position at age 18 where all of these options are open to them. Now you may ask, especially if you know other homeschool families, if this is so easy, why do so many families fail? And I can give you a good example of the failure. The U.S. military, which has full-time careers available to as many young adults as desire them, the military struggles to recruit. And one of the reasons why they struggle to recruit is because the children, the 18-year-olds, are too dumb. They don't even have a basic education. They don't have sufficient learning to pass the ASVAB, which is the entrance test for the military, and qualify for all of these military careers and opportunities that are available. So that's the first problem. And the ASVAB is not difficult. It's a general standardized test, but the kids are simply not educated well enough to pass even the basic entrance examination. Secondly, children are too out of shape, too unhealthy, too wimpy to be willing to go through basic training, to get into military shape. And so they avoid the military because of the physical challenge, where if children are raised fit and healthy, that should be the least of their concerns. To be an 18-year-old and know that you've got to get through basic training and you have a military career with college expenses paid and all that available to you, and the obstacle is a physical training, that shouldn't be a concern for a healthy young adult. The other issue that hinders recruiting is that kids have criminal records by the time they're 18 years old, and they're disqualified because of crimes that have been committed. And then you've got other problems like tattoos and drugs and things like that also disqualify kids. But in American society, for all of the resources that are available, for all of the talk, kids are not put in a position where they avoid these troubles and can qualify for military service. And the same is true for other areas of life. So the objectives are not difficult. What puts children in danger in almost all circumstances is that parents go into this work of homeschooling with unrealistic education. They fail to accomplish these minimum requirements or basic objectives because their arrogance leads them to aim too high and get into things that they shouldn't even be talking about. Unrealistic expectations, arrogant ambitions cause them to fail to prepare their children for necessary objectives. When I say that these objectives are simple, that it's easy to actually accomplish these things, I mean that. It's easy. The danger is unrealistic expectations, getting entangled in all kinds of nonsense, and actually screwing up the kids' childhood and education, trying to do things that you shouldn't even be talking about. And I'll give you an example. We see many parents, and I'll talk about this more in a little bit. We see many parents signing kids up for all kinds of sports and extracurricular activities. And if you ask them, why are you doing this? Why do you have this kid signed up for winter baseball league? Why do you have this kid signed up for 3 different instrument lessons and all of these activities and camps and this? The parents will say things like, oh, well, in order to get admitted to a selective college, you need to have, a full resume of activities. You need to show them that you're active, that you're well-rounded, that you've got lots of skills and interests, and you're not lazy, and so on. And that's all false. That's all false. There is no college anywhere that's looking for kids with lots of activities, but you'll find parents running all over the place with kids in all kinds of activities, saying it's for college, it's for college, it's for college. And that's just objectively false. So there's all kinds of errors that are made. There's all kinds of wives' tales and rumors and hearsay talk about what's needed for college and career. And that's what parents are doing, and it's false. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So we've got to know what we're doing. It's not complicated. And in American society, it's very easy to do these things. Very easy to do these things. The danger is arrogantly, ambitiously reaching too high. If we focus on these necessary objectives, and we've got a gifted, motivated kid, it's very easy to allow that kid to reach higher. That's very easy. If we have a gifted, motivated, individual child who wants to do more, who wants to study and reach higher, who wants to train to be more fit, who wants to pursue more religion, if we have a child who has interests to do more, that's a good problem to have, and it's very easy to provide for such a child. The reality, however, is that that's normally not going to be the case. Normally, the ambitious, motivated ones are the parents, and they're trying to force their children to do things that their children don't even understand, have no interest in, because it's the parents' ambition, and it's the parents' desire. And the parents are driven to try to make their kids these little show poodles that they can show off to their friends, and that causes parents to actually lose those essential objectives in the long run. So that's the danger that I think we need to especially avoid. And this is especially true for young parents who are very confident in themselves. They may be motivated themselves individually. They may be spiritually minded. They may be in great physical shape. They may love working out and exercising. They may love studying. They may be academic. They may be successful in school. They may be successful in their profession. And they think they're just going to reproduce themselves and raise copies of themselves, and they're not. So very often, young parents who think that reproduction includes the reproduction of character and interests and abilities, they have a lot to learn, and they make lots of painful mistakes. So what I'm saying is, by understanding these three essential objectives, focusing on these things, because these are your actual duties as a parent, focus on these three essential objectives, and know that if you have a child that's special, that's gifted in some special way, motivated, it's no problem to help a motivated child accomplish more. But if you're the one who's ambitious, if you're the one who wants to do more, you're going to end up costing your children these essential objectives while you play some crazy game trying to drag them into all sorts of things that they're not interested in. So that's my warning to young parents. So let's talk about these three objectives and how they can actually be accomplished. First of all, we need to raise our children to be confirmed in the Catholic Church. Our duty as Catholic parents is to initiate, and that's a key word. You should take a permanent marker and write it on your hand. Initiate. Initiate. Your job as a parent is not to raise a saint. It's not to make a saint. Your duty as a parent is to initiate your children into the Catholic life. That's your duty. Your duty is to initiate your children into the Catholic life. Think about it. When your children are born, you are taught by the Church to bring them to baptism. Why? Because in order to have original sins forgiven and washed away, they need to be baptized. The children are not making the decision to do that. The parents are making the decision to do that. Why? Because the parents are called upon by the Church to initiate their children into the Catholic life. Therefore, it's reasonable to bring them to baptism, because baptism is a rite of initiation into the Catholic life. Parents may baptize their children because it's initiatory. It's initiating the child into the Catholic life, into the Catholic Church. Parents bring their children to church. They bring their children to Mass. They bring their children to faith formation. They bring their children to First Confession and First Communion. They initiate them into the faith. They have the right and responsibility to do that. They're not making their children Catholics. They're not raising saints. They're not raising priests or monks or nuns. None of that is the parents' responsibility. Initiating the children into the Catholic life is the parents' responsibility. That begins at baptism, continues through all of their formation and sacramental participation, obeying the precepts of the Church, modeling the Catholic life, teaching the Catholic faith to the children as they grow up, and then, last of all, leading the child to confirmation, where the Church essentially says to the parents, "Thank you, you've done your job." Now it's the child's responsibility. So the goal for parents is to lead their children to confirmation. And we can do that with the guidance and direction of our priests, of our spiritual directors, following their instructions as our children grow up. So step one, like I said, is getting the children baptized, bringing the children with us to Mass, participating in the life of the parish, initiating our children into the parish life. That's our duty as parents. When our children reach 6, 7 years old, following the Church's directions for sacramental preparation, whatever our pastor says is to be done, following those instructions, preparing our children, catechizing our children, helping our children to be properly disposed to receive the sacraments at the appropriate time, under the direction and with the approval of our pastors. Again, initiation. And then after First Confession and Communion is received, continue bringing the children to church, bringing the children into the life of the parish community, catechizing the children, preparing them for the sacrament of confirmation. And then at confirmation, which begins to engage with the will of the child as an independent, bringing them to the point where they are disposed favorably to the Church. The Church recognizes that proper formation and disposition and confers upon them the sacrament of confirmation, which is like the award of Catholic parenting. That's within our power as Catholic parents. It takes place normally ages 14, 15, 16, in the first half of high school, bringing our children to receive the sacrament of confirmation, to literally, and think about this and appreciate this, to receive the Holy Spirit through the sacrament of confirmation from the bishop of the Church or one appointed by the bishop. You can give that to your children. You can give your children the sacramental grace of baptism, of making confession, of receiving communion, of receiving confirmation. Almost all of that is in your power as a parent. And notice that all of it is done before the age when the child becomes independent. So the first objective is to lead your children to the sacrament of confirmation. Within your power, very simple, not difficult. So that's objective number one. Objective number two, lead your child to a high school diploma. Your child does not need to get admitted to Harvard at age 18. Your child does not need to get admitted to the state university at age 18. All of the talk of college preparation and college admissions, none of that is a priority in homeschooling. None of it is necessary. None of it is necessary, and I'll explain why in a minute. What is necessary for your children, what is necessary is a high school diploma. And they should have a high school diploma by the time they're 18 years old. That is necessary for your children. All of those options I mentioned, religious vocations, military careers, civilian occupations, they all require a high school diploma. Therefore, as a parent, thinking of the best interest of your children and respecting their freedom, what you can and should focus on is providing your child with a high school diploma by the time they're 18 years old. This is very easy, it's within your power, and you can do it. You can give them a high school diploma. Now, when we think about high school diplomas, here's the danger. And let me say two things. First of all, we live in a society in the 21st century. We live in a society where there are compulsory education requirements. Our children must be educated. It's the law. We have to provide for the education of our children. And there is a certain level that we are responsible to fulfill. We've got to give our children an education that's equivalent to the modern public school education. And the reason why that's required is because our children are respected by the state as citizens. And the state says these children have a right to receive the basic education that's made available to all American citizens. And parents can't deny the kids that right that is theirs by birth. So if we want to educate our own children, homeschool our own children, we've got to provide an education that is equivalent to that of a public school. That doesn't mean we need to give them a public school education at home. It means to be that the level of achievement needs to be equivalent or higher than that which is available to them in the public school system. That's not hard to do. So that's the first thing. We live in a compulsory education society. We must educate our children. It's the law. However, we do not need to raise our children to be the valedictorian of the local school. So if we go to a local public school, a local public high school, for example, we may find the valedictorian is a genius. The valedictorian of the local public high school may be headed to an Ivy League school. That's not the standard of public education. That's the achievement of that individual student. When we talk about the education at a public school level, equivalent to the public school level, we're talking about average scores of public school students. We're talking about averages. That's what the public schools are. That's the level provided by the public schools. So we don't have to sit there and look at the honors kids and say, if you can't provide your children with an honors level education, you're a failure. That is not true. That is not what's required by compulsory education laws. And often, to satisfy all of the responsibilities that we have with our children, we may have to sacrifice academic achievement for the sake of sacramental preparation, for the sake of physical health and fitness, for the sake of family life, for the sake of family business, for the sake of family responsibilities, and so on. So we do not have to raise our children to be equivalent to the school valedictorian in order to satisfy compulsory education requirements. Now think of what modern schools do. Think of what public schools do. They take all of the children born at a certain time and they lump them together into one grade. So we'll have, the graduating class of 2036, and they'll be lumped together from the time they're 5, 6 years old. And then they're led through the public school curriculum. The children are not required, and make sure you understand this, The children are not required to demonstrate mastery of the school curriculum. The children are not required to demonstrate mastery of the school curriculum. They're required to pass each grade. They're required to not fail each grade. If a child does not fail each grade, he will be promoted to the next grade, and that will continue until he graduates and receives a high school diploma. So what's required to obtain a high school diploma is not failing high school. Now you may say, these standards seem really low. That's what I would like you to understand. I'd like you to understand how easy this actually is. To give your children a high school diploma means to lead them to have an education that is better than failing high school. Now, I would expect that homeschooled children actually accomplish much, much more. But what I'm saying is the objective is very easy to obtain. And often, homeschooling parents penalize their children. They penalize them by setting artificial standards that don't exist in modern schools. And then they hold the child back because the child's not fulfilling the parents' standards. So, for example, you can have a child who's in 7th grade, and the parent decides that far beyond all grade level requirements, they're going to require Latin and foreign language and extra religion classes and extracurricular activities and extra math lessons, and the child will end up accomplishing less than he would have if he was in a public school 7th grade class. If he was in the public school 7th grade class, he just would have went through the school year, the teacher would have taught the lessons, assigned the activities, given the quizzes and tests, and given the child a grade, and at the end of the year, as long as he didn't get an F, he would be credited with 7th grade, and he would move on to 8th grade. And the child would just move from grade to grade with the grade, the actual letter grade, that he earned for that year of study. Homeschooling parents often pull their kids off of that path, trying to do more in an unrealistic way, and they end up getting themselves lost and confused, and they take weeks off school, and they don't get stuff done, they fall behind, and then the parent comes up with this solution. We're just going to do 7th grade over again. We're just going to start 7th grade over again because we screwed up last year and we got caught up in this and that, and when we stopped that and we messed that up, and then mom was sick for a month and she was pregnant and dad was unemployed for 6 weeks, and that was and so they've taken the kid off the simple, necessary path for all of these unrealistic expectations, and then they think that they'll just do it over the next year. Now the kid's a year behind. And they do that multiple times. I can't tell you how many homeschooling families I've had contact me who have a 19, 20, 22-year-old child at home who still hasn't received a high school diploma. And that makes no sense. That is entirely the parent's fault. There is no way that your child should not have a high school diploma at the normal time in his life where public school kids are getting diplomas. You have to lead your child through the necessary high school studies. They do not need to be mastered. You do not need perfect scores. You do not need 99th percentile standardized test scores. You do not need straight A's. You need to go through the material and finish the grade. You need to not fail high school. That's what needs to be done, realistically. And if you do that, your child can have a high school diploma when he's 18 years old, with no nonsense. Now, the simple way to do that, very simple, is to provide your child with a grade level set of studies. So for example, in our program, which I recommend, to be honest, I recommend as the simplest way, the most affordable and simplest way to do this. Provide your child with a set of grade level studies where those studies are broken down to task levels and the kids just need to complete tasks, and just help your child complete grade level tasks. Don't try to design your own curriculum and all of this foolishness. Help your child complete grade level tasks through the course of the year. As much as you get done, great. At the end of the year, take a grade level standardized test. We offer them in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So at the end of ninth grade, in May or June of the ninth grade year, take a grade 9 standardized test. You can do it online at home. We provide these tests. Take the test. As long as the child doesn't get a horrific score, as long as the child gets an average score, everything's fine. Ninth grade is done, and you move on to 10th grade. If the child has a satisfactory standardized test score and they're completing all the activities in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy system, they've got grades and they've got standardized test scores, they've got sufficient evidence to show that they completed the requirements for ninth grade. And then the next year, you get started in 10th grade. Provide the child with access to 10th grade level studies and just help him get tasks done. As much as can get done through the course of the year, at the end of the year, take a standardized test for 10th grade, get a decent score, 10th grade is done. Continue 11th grade, 12th grade, give the kid a high school diploma. High school diploma, done. High school transcript, done. You should never have a problem with a high school diploma or a high school transcript. All you need to do is help your child get through grade level tasks using a program like ours. Everything's recorded. In our system, everything is recorded. The time the student spends, instructional time, assignments, quizzes, exams, grades, everything is automatically recorded. All you have to do is help your child complete grade level tasks. Don't do this nonsense that homeschool families do, trying to aim for the skies and end up falling behind or having unrealistic schedules and expectations, not doing anything, and then redoing it and redoing it and redoing it because you have this perfectionist attitude. Get the necessary tasks done. Use a grade level standardized test to demonstrate that grade level achievement has been made, and move on and give your children a high school diploma at age 18. If you get all that done and everything's going great and you want to do more, that's not a problem. Very, very easy to do that. But don't screw around with grade level studies because it's too easy to just get it done. There's no reason to penalize your children because they're homeschooling. Just get the basics done and give them a high school diploma at age 18. That's simple. So we've talked about confirmation in the church, and we've talked about the high school diploma. The next thing is physical health. This is a real challenge today because of just modern culture. We've got so much sedentary time, video games, electronics, the internet, social media. There's so much to do that's sedentary. There's so much to do that's done on a couch or in bed, laying on the floor, with a smartphone, with a tablet, with a computer, with a television, on and on. The kids are raised in unnatural, unhealthy, sedentary environments. These kids have to be exercising. They have to be active. They have to build physical strength. They have to be healthy. You can't feed them junk food. You can't let them eat what they want to eat. You as a parent have to be disciplined yourself. You can't eat like a slob and give it to your children to make yourself feel good and raise a whole family of unhealthy slobs. When your children turn 18 years old and they enter into this time of legal independence, one of the greatest virtues that they can possess is going to be their physical health and strength. And again, I'm not talking about inevitable sicknesses or diseases. I'm talking about habit-induced sicknesses, weaknesses, diseases, disabilities that are caused by poor culture, by unhealthy living. You have got to raise children who are as healthy as they can be naturally. You've got to make sacrifices as a parent to get your children exercising. Simple ways to do this. Instead of buying them video games and televisions and toys to play with in the house, buy them a playground for the backyard. Buy them a bicycle. Give them a place to ride a bike. If you have a home with a big driveway, they can ride their roller skate, shoot baskets, ride their bikes in the driveway. That's what they should be doing. Get the kids exercise. If you don't have a house with a big driveway or a playground or a bunch of property where the kids can run around and climb trees and throw things and exercise and become strong, you have to make an effort to bring them to a place where they can do that. Bring them to the park. Give them time. Doesn't have to be every day, but regular time to get out and run around, climb on the playground, go for walks on trails through the woods, go roller skating, go ride a bike at the public park, go fishing, go get out of the house and get the kids physical exercise. When the kids get older, like teenage years, if you've got an empty garage or a spare room, put exercise equipment in it. Get weights. Get a Nautilus machine where the kids can lift weights and exercise. Get a treadmill. Put it in the house. Let the kids exercise. Make the kids' extracurricular activity simply be physical exercise. They don't have to play a sport. They don't have to be jiu-jitsu experts. They don't have to be ballerinas. Make physical fitness the extracurricular activity and give your 18-year-old child a physically healthy, strong body. So there's lots of different circumstances, lots of different ways that can be done. We live out in the country. Our kids have always been active, but we've supported that, and we've made sacrifices to make sure that they're healthy. There are times where you've got to accept kids tearing up clothes or getting dirty or getting injured. You've got to accept those things for the sake of physical health and strength. It also is where they develop courage by being out, by taking risks, by doing things that are a little bit dangerous, overcoming fears. They build up courage and they build it incrementally over time. And that puts them into a position entering adulthood where they're not afraid, they're not intimidated. They're not intimidated by physical challenges. They're not lazy. They're not wimpy. They don't fuss when it's hot outside or when it's cold outside. They're tough. They're active. They're comfortable outside. My kids sleep outside. If the weather's nice outside, they've got a tent out in the front yard and they're camping out. My kids will climb trees, go fishing, play in the creek. They're not afraid of animals. They're raised with a general physical health and fitness and toughness, and I would add resourcefulness that puts them in position as young adults to look at the challenges of adult life and not be intimidated, but know that they can do it. I've got my eldest son right now is at Ranger School in the Army, like literally in the mountains and swamps, going through the hardest training that there is in the military, and he's not intimidated by it because he was a tough kid growing up that was allowed to go out and rough around and exercise and train. He was lifting weights at 14, training, running, The physical challenges, the mental challenges of the military don't intimidate him. My oldest daughter, his younger sister, she's in flight school in the Army, training to be a medevac pilot, flying an Apache helicopter. She just finished SEER school, survival school in the Army. Not intimidated by that stuff, not afraid of the physical challenges, because she was raised to be active and tough as a child. And the same is true for my other kids, all of whom have chosen military careers thus far, because the military just gives them so much in terms of resources, independence, provides them with training, with money for college and career, all kinds of opportunities. They had that available to them because they were confirmed in the Catholic Church, given a high school diploma, and they were raised physically healthy and strong, not intimidated by challenges of adult life. So I as much as I want to be spiritual and intellectual, we also need to be physically responsible, because real life is physically demanding, and our kids need to be raised physically healthy and strong. I grew up as a kid with a father who was an electrical contractor. It was an active working class family. I grew up tough, working in the garage, working with tools, doing stuff mechanically, getting dirty, and learning that, you could always get washed up when you get home. My mother used to say, "Dirt don't hurt." When I was a kid, I was raised to be a tough working class kid. I played sports. I was allowed to have some risky activity. It made me resourceful when I was a young adult. I wasn't intimidated. I had courage to enter into adult life and get after things. I enjoyed that life. My wife had the opposite. She was raised in a wealthy family. Dad worked in New York City. Mom was a stay-at-home housewife, lived in the house, didn't get out much, didn't exercise, didn't get challenged physically. And she's always struggled with the physical challenges of adult life. So in my marriage, the two of us had two different upbringings, and the consequences of those different upbringings are very, very evident. Now, the difference for my wife is because she's a great mother. She put her own weaknesses aside, and she sacrificed to make sure that even though she is uncomfortable doing these things, her children had the opportunities to do the things that she didn't. So she'll do things with the kids that she knows that she stinks at, but she does it for the sake of the kids. She's always taken the kids out. For example, when our kids were little, toddlers, and she was having babies, she would take them out every day for a long walk around the neighborhood and let them ride their bikes with training wheels or ride their roller skates while she pushed a stroller with a baby. She always made time, always made an effort to get the kids exercise, get them out of the house, get them outdoors, even though it was something she was uncomfortable with. She made that sacrifice as a parent, and to this day, she does that. She takes kids to the gym in town where they can work out. She takes my daughter to dance classes. She takes the kids to the park. She goes outside for walks with the kids. Buy the kids a dog they can play with outside. We have to support all of the activities. And again, these don't need to be formal sports and high skill activities. It's just exercise and activity that challenges the kids physically, allows them to develop courage by being risky at times, overcoming fears, and not allowing physical challenges of adult life to paralyze the kids when they get to that point and they need to move out into the world and it's physically demanding. So those three objectives, I want to bring this talk to an end here. Those three objectives, and we can talk more about these things in detail, but providing your children with an initiation to the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church, providing your children with a high school diploma, providing your children with physical health and strength will put your children in a position at age 18 as they enter adulthood to have the whole world open to them. and it's very simple. It's very simple. Let me say one last thing before I finish, because parents may listen to this and say, but what about college? What about... I mentioned this earlier. The way that our educational system is designed, colleges market one thing, whereas the system provides for something very different. Colleges, selective, 4-year colleges, state universities, and so on, they want high school students and high school parents to think that children need to be admitted to a freshman class at the goal destination when they graduate high school. They want children to attend, or students to attend, their colleges and universities for all 4 years of college. That's what they want. That's in their financial interests. They want parents and students in high school to think that you need to get admitted to their program when you graduate high school, and they put pressure on parents and pressure on children to do that. That's from the marketing department of the colleges. That's what the colleges want. That is not what our children need. It's not necessary. And it's also not how the system works. If your child has a high school diploma, he can automatically begin college studies the next fall at a local community college. For a fraction of the cost, he can also work from home, especially today where lots of the courses are online. He can begin his college studies as an 18-year-old high school graduate at home, working online at a fraction of the price, and complete real college courses with real degree credits with no admission stress, application stress, extracurricular activity stress. None of that is necessary. He can go right from high school graduation to community college studies. That's how the system is designed to work. He can study for 2 years. He can earn an associate's degree at a community college, which is halfway through a bachelor's degree, so he could have 60 credits. He could then apply and transfer to the 4-year school, finish his last 2 years at the selective college or university, and get that university degree. It's that simple. If he starts as a community college student and, like one of my sons did, just gets straight A's first semester, he can apply to transfer earlier with 24 credits and transfer to the 4-year school. That's up to the child. And this is what I'd like you to see. You can put your child in position to succeed with all options open. The child can then decide what his ambition will be, how hard he'll work, what he wants to do, what doors he wants to keep open, and so on. That's his adult choice. But your child can go from a high school diploma straight into college studies with no admission stress. That's how the system is set up to work. That's what community colleges are for. It's the perfect transition, I would argue, for most kids. It's the perfect transition into independent adult life. The perfect transition. Your kids, when they receive a high school diploma, can also join the military. They don't have to go active duty. They don't have to go to Iraq. They can join the military in the reserves, go to basic training, choose a career, receive the training for that career, and come back home and go to college and have the military pay for their college education. They can come home from basic training and what's called AIT, Advanced Individual Training. They can come home, have the college pay for their, have the military pay for their college, and join ROTC. And when they graduate, have an officer career in the military waiting for them. There are so many options if you have a high school diploma. That's all that's necessary. You are not going to be able to control your child's adult life, because when they become legally independent, they're free to do whatever they want. Your duty as a parent is to put them in position where they have all options open, to initiate them into the Catholic faith, and to provide them with a healthy, strength-building, courage-building life as they grow up. If you do that as a parent, you will have done everything that you can do for that child. You will have done everything you can do for that child. The problem is that your child at 18, once he gains that independence, he's going to start making bad decisions, and he's going to lose certain opportunities. Certain doors are going to close, so certain windows are going to close, and that's just God's providence. But as a parent, you can provide your child with confirmation in the Catholic Church. That's not difficult, within your power. You can provide your child with a high school diploma. It's not difficult, within your power. And you can raise a child who's healthy and physically strong. That is not difficult, within your power. If you do those three things, your child, as he enters adulthood, will be in a position where the whole world is open to him, and he'll have the opportunity to choose whatever path he wants, because they'll all be open. And that's really all that you can do. From that point on, you're just a counselor. You're just a counselor once your child reaches adulthood. You're no longer a controller. You're just a counselor. Your child is going to need to make his own decisions, and you will have put him in position to do so. If you're a homeschooling parent and you don't know what to do, that's my advice. Don't waste your time setting higher goals or expectations than that, because if your children are motivated and all things go well, there's no problem adding stuff. But don't ever leave that path for talk about higher achievements and then risk achieving even that basic set of objectives. Be careful that arrogance and unrealistic expectations, because real life is hard. I tell my kids all the time, it's hard to do anything because we never know what the circumstances are going to be. We never know what's going to happen. We never know if our health is going to continue. We never know how things are going to get turned upside down. Always make sure you're getting the essentials done. And if you do that, adding stuff is easy. But focus on the essentials. That's what I would advise homeschooling parents with the right motives, with the right goals, who don't know what they're doing and want to give their children the best upbringing they can. Those three objectives: Catholic confirmation, high school diploma, physical health. If you do those three things, you'll accomplish the goal of putting your young adult child in a position where all options are open to him. And that's the goal of parenting and homeschooling. I know that raises 1,000 other practical questions and issues. I'm happy to talk about all of them. If there's anything I can help you with, if there's anything else you want to talk about, you've got practical questions, want to dig into the details, just let me know. I'm happy to do that. But I think that this is a reliable guide for parenting and homeschooling. Real world, real life, no nonsense, no homeschool marketing nonsense. Honest talk from one Catholic homeschooling father to other Catholic homeschooling parents. I'm happy to help in any way I can. Just get in touch. You can reach me by writing to mail@classicalliberalarts.com. And as I said, our program, the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, is designed for this very purpose, to allow parents to satisfy all these requirements and to pursue higher things if the kids are motivated. So if you'd like to join us in the academy, you can do so for free. Just visit the website at classicalliberalarts.com. If you have any questions, get in touch. I hope that's helpful. God bless.